my lifelong distrust of humanity.
These words didn't come from a movie, they came from a White House report that shocked the world in May 2026. James Miller, a 20-year veteran NYC detective who believed everyone was a thief, decided to test South Korea. He dropped a bag containing a $500,000 diamond watch in the middle of a crowded Myeong-dong street and walked away. A sudden storm hit. The bag vanished. James sneered, "I knew it. Koreans are just better at hiding it." But when he checked the CCTV, he froze. He didn't see a thief. He saw an elderly woman blocking a pickpocket and a grandfather who took off his own raincoat toe, keep a stranger's bag dry while he shivered in the freezing rain. The NY Times called it a miracle. Forget high-tech security. Korea is protected by the warmth of a grandfather's heart. This is the true face of the Republic of Korea. Subscribe, like, and comment. Republic of Korea fighting. Let's dive into the story that moved the world.
Hi, everyone. I am James Miller, a man who has spent more than 2 decades hunting the shadows in the unforgiving streets of New York. During my years as a major crimes captain, I learned one cold, hard truth. People are not to be trusted, they are only to be monitored. That was my reality. In the middle of Manhattan, a bag disappears in the blink of an eye, and even a hand reaching out for help is often nothing more than bait for a crime. To a man like me, words like conscience or trust were nothing but expensive luxuries found only in fairy tales. So, why am I standing here today, sharing this story with you? In my hand, I hold a worn leather notebook. It is the draft of a report I wrote for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The very first line of that report begins like this: "Today, I admit that the cynicism I have held toward humanity my entire life was fundamentally wrong." I will be honest with you. When I first stepped onto Korean soil, I was convinced that the stories of its safety were nothing more than an exaggerated PR stunt. How could anyone leave their belongings in public without them being stolen? I dismissed it as either a staged act for a controlled society or a lucky coincidence experienced by a few. But then I lost my mother's heirloom, a piece more precious to me than my own life in the middle of Myeong-dong. The scene I witnessed amidst that scorching rain shook the very foundations of my soul. I saw how a nameless Korean elder covered the fear that no advanced technology could solve using nothing but a single rain-soaked raincoat. This is the incredible untold story that shook the White House. Let me tell you how it all unfolded. In May 2026, Myeong-dong was glowing with lights even more brilliant than Times Square. I deliberately chose the most crowded outdoor cafe to set my stage. Slung over my shoulder was a weathered leather bag, inside of which sat a diamond pocket watch valued at $500,000. This was no ordinary trip, it was a covert operation to document the reality of Korean public safety for the U.S. government. As soon as my coffee arrived, I casually dropped the bag next to my chair. I then moved about 5 meters away, pretending to be absorbed in my smartphone while secretly monitoring every reaction around me. In New York, doing this would mean the bag would vanish in less than 3 seconds. My heart began to throb. Would the conscience Koreans boast about truly be enough to conquer human greed? That was when I spotted him. A man with a black hat pulled low, skillfully weaving through the crowd. It was Andrei Volkov, a notorious international pickpocket known for operating on a global scale. It seemed Andrei, like myself, was there to mock Korea's naive security and score a massive haul. He stared intensely at my bag, waiting for the perfect window of opportunity. But then, an unbelievable sight unfolded before my eyes. 2 students in school uniforms were passing by my seat when they noticed the bag had slid out toward the walkway. I expected them to snatch it and run. Instead, they very naturally used their feet to slide the bag back under the safety of the chair. "Someone might lose this, let's push it further in," they said. Their casual, selfless conversation rang clearly in my ears. I scoffed at the sight. I told myself it was just a stroke of luck. Isn't it true that anyone's true nature is revealed only when they think no one is watching? I reached out and felt the cold metal of my mother's watch through the bag. A strange sense of relief washed over me, followed by a stubborn desire to prove my cynicism right. Nearby, a tourist dropped their wallet, causing a brief commotion. 3 or 4 Koreans immediately rushed over to pick it up and hand it back to the owner. I watched this with a cold smirk. A choreographed piece, I thought. I firmly believe that nowhere in the world does unconditional kindness exist without a price. However, as if mocking my arrogance, the sky began to shift its expression. Dark, heavy clouds rolled over the neon signs of Myeong-dong, and the air grew thick with humidity. Shopkeepers began hurriedly pulling down their covers. I felt an ominous chill down my spine. A massive downpour was imminent. I adjusted my grip on the bag and walked deeper into the sea of people. Andre's gaze was still piercing the back of my head. I was certain that this peaceful order was about to crumble. When the storm hits and chaos ensues, that is when the true, ugly face of humanity finally reveals itself. It felt as though the heavens had been torn open. A sudden, violent deluge struck the asphalt of Myeong-dong, creating a thick mist of water. Screams erupted from all directions as the glamorous shopping street instantly transformed into a chaotic mess. Blinded by the rain, I instinctively threw myself into a nearby restaurant to find cover. As the cold air conditioning hit my soaked shirt, a paralyzing shiver ran down my spine. My shoulder felt impossibly light. The bag was gone. I had left the leather bag containing my mother's watch and $10,000 in cash back at that outdoor cafe chair. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest, and my mind was filled with white noise. I kicked open the restaurant door and sprinted back into the storm. It couldn't have been more than 5 seconds. I ran like a madman back to that cafe chair, slipping on the wet pavement and scraping my knees. But all that met me was an empty chair being lashed by the cold rain. The bag had vanished without a trace. "I knew it, you thieves, you liars!" I roared into the rain like a wounded animal. All the talk of 2026 Korea and its world-class security felt like a grand deception. The truth I had learned over 20 years in New York, that humans will steal the moment they get the chance, cut through my heart once again. I hated myself for losing the last physical memory of my mother. Just then, at the end of the alley, I saw a silhouette in a black coat disappearing under an umbrella. It was Andrei Volkov. I could almost see the mocking sneer on his face, laughing at my despair. I was certain he had taken it. And even if it wasn't him, who would pass up such a windfall in the middle of a storm? I began to see every Korean passing by as a criminal. Was that man hiding my bag under his umbrella? Were those laughing women accomplices? The poison of distrust paralyzed my entire body. What use was technological advancement when human conscience was so rotten? I stood in the middle of Myeong-dong, soaked like a rat, screaming like a lunatic. "Give me back my bag, you thieves!" But the only response was the indifferent sound of the rain and the puzzled stares of passers-by. I gathered my remaining strength and ran toward the nearest police substation. I wanted to see if their mighty law enforcement could do anything about this nightmare. As I burst through the glass doors, the sudden warmth felt offensive. I slammed my fist on the desk and began shouting in English. I demanded they lock down all of Myeong-dong, threatening to make it an international diplomatic crisis if they didn't find my bag. To me, the confused Korean officers looked like nothing more than incompetent actors. Could these people truly recover my lost life? Inside the substation, there was a strange, calm atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. Dozens of monitors lined the walls, showing real-time feeds of Seoul's night. I didn't even notice the puddle forming at my feet as I yelled at Officer Park So-hee, "Find my bag right now! Do you have any idea what was inside?" Officer Park didn't flinch at my outburst. She replied in a voice that was soft yet firm, "Sir, please calm down. South Korea's security system is much more sophisticated than you might imagine." Her fingers danced across the keyboard, and the CCTV feed of the Myeong-dong cafe filled the main screen. I sneered inwardly. What was the point? The thief was likely long gone. But as the timeline was rewound to the moment I left the bag, I stopped breathing. The footage showed the rain starting to lash the chair right after I ran into the restaurant. However, the scene I expected someone snatching the bag and running never happened. Instead, a man in a suit stopped in his tracks when he saw the bag. The man looked around frantically, searching for the owner. Then, to prevent the bag from getting soaked, he pushed it deep into the center of the table, under the protection of the large patio umbrella. Why is he doing that? Why not just take it? The question escaped my lips involuntarily. In New York, this was a scenario that belonged to another dimension. Officer Park zoomed in on the screen. The AI-enhanced image made the expressions of the people crystal clear. It wasn't just that one man. Students, women with groceries, everyone who passed by the bag stopped. They didn't look at it with greed, they looked at it with concern, as if worried for the owner. This was a bizarre sight that shook my lifelong belief in the inherent evil of man. Then, Andrei Volkov appeared on the corner of the screen. He approached the bag with a sly smile, but every time he tried to reach for it, he was deterred by the watchful eyes of the citizens. The people of Korea were acting as their own guardians, even without the presence of the police. Just as Andrei reached for his stun gun for one last attempt, an elderly man entered the frame. It was Mr. Kim Gap-soo, a volunteer street cleaner. He saw the bag sitting alone on the chair and clicked his tongue. Then he did something unthinkable. He took off his own worn-out raincoat and began to carefully wrap it around my bag. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. Is he stealing it now? My voice was thin and trembling. Officer Park shook her head with a smile. No, sir. He is moving the bag to the safest place possible for the owner. The monitor showed the old man walking slowly through the downpour, shielding the bag with his own body while he himself was hammered by the rain. I couldn't take my eyes off his retreating figure. What was it that kept that old man standing in the storm? How could he act as if his conscience was heavier than a bag filled with $10,000? I reached out and touched the cold glass of the monitor. I felt as if I could feel the warmth of the Korean people through the screen. Officer Park tapped my shoulder. Let's go. We've located where the grandfather is. I was speechless. My arrogant distrust was crumbling before the advanced technology of Korea and the simple conscience of an old man. How was I supposed to face him? Inside the police car, I stared blankly out the window as we raced through the rain. My mind was consumed by the image of the grandfather's back. In New York, that old man would have been surrounded by hyenas by now. Sure enough, near the entrance of a Myeong-dong underground mall, I saw a dark silhouette blocking Mr. Kim's path. It was Andrei Volkov. He was shouting in fluent English, trying to intimidate the old man. "That's my bag! Give it to me right now!" The grandfather looked confused and flustered because he couldn't understand the language. But he gripped the wet raincoat-wrapped bag with everything he had. I tried to jump out of the car before it even stopped. I was terrified that the criminal would hurt the innocent man. But in that moment, another miracle occurred. An elderly woman who had been packing up her tteokbokki stall stepped forward, wielding a large pot lid. "Hey, young man, I've been watching you, and that bag doesn't belong to you. Why are you harassing an old man?" When Andrei tried to push her aside, a man from a nearby shoe store rushed out holding a wooden shoe mold like a club. It happened in an instant. Students, a delivery driver on a scooter, and random passers-by, half a dozen people, formed a circle around Andrei. Without anyone giving an order, they became a human fortress protecting the grandfather and the bag. Andrei, who had mocked security experts across the globe, was visibly trembling at the sheer aura of these ordinary Korean citizens. "This is my bag! Call the police!" Andrei brazenly shouted in English, but the grandmother's shout was even more piercing. "Police? Yeah, we called them already, you rascal! How dare you come to our country and try to steal someone else's precious things?" Andrei was panicked. He had lived his life in a world where people turned a blind eye to the misfortune of others. But here in Myeong-dong, he had met a people who considered a stranger's trouble to be their own. I stepped out of the police car and watched the scene in a daze. I had a gun and a badge, but I wasn't the one resolving the situation. The conviction I had preached my whole life, never trust anyone, was being shredded to pieces. Why were these people standing in the rain to protect the bag of a total stranger? Andrei eventually realized he was trapped and slumped to the ground. He probably couldn't understand it. He learned that more terrifying than any high-tech security network is the conscience that knows shame embedded in the hearts of this nation's people. Even as Officer Park cuffed Andrei, the citizens were patting the grandfather's wet shoulders, making sure the bag was still safe. I couldn't bring myself to approach them for a long time. I realized that the meddling I had mocked as a cultural nuisance was actually the strongest security system holding this society together. The pride they felt in building this nation meant they couldn't stand by and watch their neighbors suffer. I, the veteran detective from New York, felt incredibly small in front of them. Once Andrei was taken away, the grandfather finally sat down on the ground, exhausted. Water was still dripping from the raincoat wrapped around the bag. I walked toward him with heavy, trembling steps. It was time for me to face not the criminals I was used to, but the pinnacle of human decency. The rain showed no signs of letting up, but the scene before me felt as if time had frozen. On the cold pavement of the mall entrance, Mr. Kim Gap-soo sat shivering. He looked to be in his mid-70s, and his lips were turning blue from the cold. Yet, in his trembling arms, he held my old leather bag as if it were a fragile infant. I stood there, unable to take another step. As I got closer, I saw that he had sacrificed his own protection, his vinyl raincoat, to wrap the bag multiple times. He had even used his own dry cotton towel to plug any gaps where water might seep in. To a man like me, who had smelled nothing but blood and lies for 20 years, this transparent kindness was more shocking than any crime I had ever investigated. "Excuse me, I am the owner of that bag." My voice was weak, swallowed by the sound of the falling rain. The grandfather looked up and studied me for a long time, clutching the bag even tighter. "Are you really the owner? You're not a friend of that thief, are you?" His eyes were so clear and piercing that I felt my cynical soul was being stripped naked. Only after I showed my passport and a photo of myself at the cafe did he finally let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank goodness you're here." The leather looked so nice I thought the rain would ruin it if I left it there. With trembling hands, he began to untie the knots of the raincoat. When the bag finally emerged, I gasped. The world outside was a flood, but inside the grandfather's arms, the bag was perfectly dry and pristine. He had risked his own health, perhaps even his life, to ensure a stranger's bag stayed dry. No high-tech vault in New York could have protected my mother's watch as perfectly as he did. My hands shook violently as I took the bag from him. Why did you go to such lengths? You could have just left it at a police station." To my question, the grandfather just let out a soft laugh and wiped the rain from his face. If I walked to the station, the bag would get wet. The owner would surely come back soon, and they need to find it where they left it to feel at peace. In that simple sentence lived the trust in humanity I had been searching for my entire life. Nearby shopkeepers brought over towels and hot drinks for the grandfather. "Mr. Kim, you did something amazing today. I'm so glad that gentleman found his bag." They were as happy as if it were their own success. I realized then what protects South Korea isn't the AI or the smart city cameras. It is the wet raincoat of this old man and the hearts of the citizens who cheer him on. I hugged the bag to my chest and knelt before the grandfather. The dam in my heart, built of cynicism and bitterness, finally burst. I, who hadn't flinched at the sight of death in New York, began to sob like a child at the feet of this nameless Korean elder. He patted my back awkwardly. "Oh dear, this Western gentleman has such a soft heart. You found it, that's all that matters." Why the tears? The rain was still cold, but I didn't feel it anymore. The hatred and distrust that had ruled my life were being washed away by the rain of Myeong-dong. I didn't know then how much this small miracle in an alleyway would change the world. I just held his wrinkled hand and gave him the most sincere thanks I had ever uttered. The hands that lifted me up were rough but incredibly warm. When I regained my senses, I found myself sitting in a small, old soup house in a Myeong-dong alley. The shop was filled with white steam from a giant cauldron, and the savory scent of beef broth tickled my nose. Across from me sat Mr. Kim, still wet but smiling. With shaking hands, I opened the bag and pulled out a stack of $10,000. In New York, that money was worth more than a human life. I pushed the bills toward him. "Grandfather, this is my sincere gratitude. It's not nearly enough, but please accept this." I lowered my head, expecting his eyes to gleam with greed. But I was wrong again. The moment he saw the money, his brow furrowed as if he were looking at something foul. "You Western man, don't you dare insult me! Do you think I stood in that rain shivering just to get some cash?" he shouted, pushing his chair back as if to leave. Why? Why would a man refuse a sum that could make his life comfortable for years? Just then, an elderly woman came out from the kitchen with a large tray. "Agu, you foolish man! Take your money back to your own country. This is Myeong-dong, South Korea." She swiped the money aside with her tray and set down 2 steaming bowls of gukbap soup with rice. "We don't need your money, so just drink this hot soup. I'm giving it to you because I can't stand seeing you blubbering in the rain." Her words were harsh, but they carried a warmth that could melt a frozen heart. I picked up a spoon and took a sip. As the hot broth traveled down my throat and reached my stomach, the ice that had encased my heart for 20 years vanished. This bowl of soup felt more noble than any 5-star meal I had ever had in Manhattan. The grandfather sat back down, chewed on some radish kimchi, and muttered, "This is what life is supposed to taste like." I looked at my mother's watch, which was still ticking perfectly inside the bag. I realized that what the grandfather had rejected wasn't just cash, it was my arrogant attempt to put a price on his conscience. To these people, kindness wasn't a transaction, it was a duty of being human. I am so sorry. I have committed a great disrespect. I put the money away and bowed deeply to them both. I felt more connected to them as humans in that moment than when I was offering money. Other customers in the shop watched us with gentle smiles. What kind of history did this country go through to produce such ordinary people with the dignity of great philosophers? As I finished every last drop of that soup, I made a silent vow. I would go back and completely rewrite my report. This wasn't a country to be analyzed by crime statistics. It was a miraculous land where the common citizens lived by the highest moral standards. The sun was rising in my heart, even as the storm continued outside.
Sitting in a corner of the shop, I opened my laptop. My mind was clearer than ever. The original title of my report was "The Flaws in Korean Security and the Limits of a Surveillance Society." I deleted it without hesitation and typed a new title: South Korea, the Final Bastion of Human Trust. I wrote down everything I had witnessed, how ordinary people stopped a criminal, and how an old man sacrificed his comfort for a stranger's property. This is not a country where people refrain from crime because they fear the law. It is a country where people live by the shame they feel toward one another. This report was transmitted instantly to Washington via the Homeland Security servers. At the same time, I posted a photo of Mr. Kim's back soaked and weary on my social media. I captioned it, "The greatest lesson a New York detective ever learned in Seoul." Within 10 minutes, the post exploded. Thousands of likes and shares flooded in from all over the world, filled with the Korean flag and messages of awe. A New York Times journalist shared my post with the comment, "While we spend trillions on security hardware, Korea protects the world with the raincoat of a grandfather." People from London, Paris, and Tokyo began calling it the miracle of Myeong-dong. The status of South Korea was being redefined, not just by K-pop or dramas, but by the most noble aspect of human nature. Officer Park showed me her tablet. Andrei Volkov had been apprehended at a subway station because of a flood of citizen reports. "Sir, we didn't do it." The citizens shared his description in real time and tracked him down before we even got there. I was stunned. In 2026 Korea, every citizen was a silent guardian of the nation's conscience. I received an urgent video call from my superior in Washington. "James, your report was just mentioned in a White House security briefing. The president has ordered a study on Korean civic consciousness." His voice was a mix of shock and respect. The most powerful nation in the world was now in a position to learn how to live as humans from South Korea. I told him, "Sir, this can't be learned through study. It is a miracle created by the blood and heart of a people over thousands of years." The National Safety Project, pursued by the Korean government, wasn't just about more cameras. It was about reigniting the sense of community in the hearts of the people. I added one last line to my report. If the Earth were to face an apocalypse, and only one civilization could be saved, I would choose South Korea, without a single doubt. My steps were light as I left the restaurant. My life's clock had started ticking in a new direction. The time of distrust and hatred was over. The time of trust and love had begun. In the middle of Myeong-dong, I was finally reborn as a human being. On the last day of May 2026, before heading to the airport, I returned to that narrow alley in Myeong-dong. The sky was brilliantly clear, and the streets were vibrant with life. I found Mr. Kim Gap-soo there, cleaning the streets with his tongs and bag, as if nothing had happened. He saw me and flashed a toothless grin. "Hey, Weston man, still got your bag?" This time, instead of cash, I handed him a carefully wrapped gift. Inside was a high-tech functional raincoat, vitamins, and a letter I had struggled to write in Korean. "You are the greatest teacher of my life." He read it and scratched his head, embarrassed. "Aigu, it was just a natural thing to do. Why all this?" That word natural hit me harder than anything else. What the world calls a miracle, the people of Korea call natural. I gave him a long, warm embrace. The hands that had once choked criminals were now sharing the warmth of a fellow human. He patted my back and said, "Safe travels, son." When he called me son, I felt my heart stop with emotion. In the car to Incheon Airport, I watched the Han River flow by. The generation that built the miracle on the Han River was now guarding the miracle of integrity. At the airport lounge, I saw unattended laptops and bags sitting on tables. I no longer thought they were asking to be robbed. I saw them as the most noble scenery of a future humanity. As I waited for my flight, the news was broadcasting the impact of my report. Major cities in the US, and Europe were sending delegations to study Korea's citizen-led security model. One nameless old man's conscience was moving the systems of giant nations. The slogan, "The global standard, South Korea," was no longer just a slogan. It was a living truth. I looked at my mother's watch one last time. Its ticking sounded like the grandfather's laughter. "Mother, look!" Your treasure was protected by the conscience of this great nation. As the plane took off, the night view of Seoul looked like millions of diamonds scattered across the earth. South Korea is not just a country where people don't steal. It is a country where jong affection lives, where the sadness of a stranger is felt as one's own. I am no longer just a New York detective. I am an honorary citizen of this nation's heart. If anyone asks me where the hope for humanity lies, I will point to the east, to South Korea. As we soared above the clouds, tears filled my eyes. They were tears of joy for having rediscovered faith in humanity. The miracle you showed me has now become the new global standard. To the great people of this great nation, I offer my deepest respect and love.
Do you remember that rough hand that covered a stranger's bag with a raincoat in the freezing rain of Myeong-dong? The wall of distrust that a veteran New York detective had built over a lifetime was brought down not by high technology, but by the natural heart of an ordinary grandfather, the voice of that soup house grandmother who prioritized human dignity over $10,000. That is the great heritage you have built through honest labor and perseverance. The last bastion of humanity that James Miller wrote about, that bastion was built by you, the people who refuse to covet what isn't yours, and who never turn away from a neighbor's plight. If this story has brought a small sense of comfort and a surge of pride to your hearts today, I could ask for nothing more. Please support South Korea by subscribing and liking this video, and leave a comment. Republic of Korea fighting. Your words are the power that allows us to keep sharing these miraculous stories. I truly respect each and every one of you for silently guarding the dignity of this nation. The night air is cold. Please stay warm and have a night filled with the most proud and peaceful dreams. Because you exist, South Korea is the light of the world today. Thank you.